Well, looks like we're live. Get the thumbs up that the sound is good. Okay, got it. Thank you, Gabby, my assistant. So we're here again on a live to talk to you about your questions. I'm going to answer whatever questions come in. I have some questions that were sent in by our people in the Genesis Health Club, which is a subscription program. So if you sign up for a Genesis Gold subscription, you're automatically in the club and you'll get an email that allow you to send in questions ahead of time. So you don't have to be live on this to ask me questions, although I love when you've joined me live because then we can interact. So, but today I want to focus on the gut. I will answer any questions you have, but let's start off with the gut. So I like to think of your body like as a donut. So if you think of a donut, right, the outside of the donut is your skin, the inside is your gut. So whatever's coming into you through the outside is the skin kind of protects you. So does your gut. But your gut, its job is to be what's called a transpermeable membrane, which allows water and nutrients in and out, but not toxins to go back into the bloodstream. So your colon should be transpermeable, not permeable, not allowing everything to go in and out. So after you eat something and it gets digested, broken down with stomach acids in the stomach, passed into the small intestine, broken down by bile, digested by digestive enzymes, nutrients absorbed in the small intestine, whatever the liver dumped through the bile is also your waste products, which is handcuffed and allowed to then dump into the colon. If the colon is healthy, and it has a healthy membrane that is transpermeable. What that means is that those cells, so each of my hands are a cell. So a transpermeable membrane has a tiny little space between it. But if the spaces are too wide, we call that leaky gut, meaning that bigger molecules can go through, like toxins that should not be able to go through. Only water should be passing back and through. Nutrients pass through to the bloodstream in the small intestine. In the colon, it should only be water. So if that transpermeable membrane isn't functioning properly, you're going to have problems. The other issue in the gut that affects your health tremendously is your microbiome. If your microbiome is not healthy, meaning it's not well balanced, you don't have a lot of beneficial biome, you have things that could be pathogens, pathogenic fungi and bacteria, parasites, you're not going to digest your foods properly. You're going to be more toxic. You're going to have a lot more issues. Now, one of the nice things about Genesis Gold is that when you start taking Genesis Gold, if you have a healthy gut, you're going to start feeling the benefits fairly quickly. If you have an unhealthy gut, you have overgrowth of candida, you have pathogens growing in the gut, you have leaky gut syndrome, you may have some side effects to Genesis Gold. Okay. And the side effects would include you feel bloated and gassy afterwards, more indigestion. You may have, now it's not unusual to have a little diarrhea if you're detoxing, but that bloating and gassiness could suggest that Genesis Gold is feeding not just the good guys, but they're feeding the bad guys too. They're feeding the pathogens and not just the beneficial bacteria. So that's when you would stop taking Genesis Gold, start taking Sacred 7 to support your hypothalamus and treat your gut issues. Now, I have two different treatments that I've put over the counter for gut issues. One, which is anti-candidal, which candida overgrowth is very common, and that is my DMAR candida therapy. And then one is for SIBO, which uses natural ingredients, botanicals, to actually help to balance out small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's what SIBO stands for, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if you have bacteria in your small intestine that shouldn't be there, there are a few bacteria that are in the small intestine, but if the ileocecal valve, the valve between the small intestine and the large intestine, isn't functioning properly, and it allows colon bacteria to upflush back up into the small intestine, you'll get an overgrowth there, and that overgrowth will cause gas and bloating after meals, especially for carbohydrates, but it could be anything that you react to. Genesis Gold can induce that as well if you already have SIBO. So it's not like it's causing the issue, it's highlighting it. It's highlighting that you have some kind of dysbiosis imbalance in the natural microflora of the gut. So that's why treating your gut is so important. The other thing that's really important about the gut is that when your hypothalamus is in really good balance, it actually communicates beautifully with the microbiome of your gut so that you detoxify appropriately, your nutrient energy exchange is appropriate, everything's working beautifully. If the hypothalamus is dysfunctional, your microbiome are kind of on their own. There's nobody kind of controlling the program there, and you're going to have more issues with toxicity, more issues with immune issues. You may have more pain issues because your gut microbiome are throwing out neuroendocrine chemicals that are actually causing more issues because they're not being well directed by the hypothalamus. So I have seen that quite a bit in my patients who have irritable bowel syndrome, either with constipation or with diarrhea. And when they have irritable bowel syndrome, taking Genesis Gold can actually help to calm down the diarrhea and move the bowels for those with constipation because it's working at the central controller. It's helping the hypothalamus direct the gut's motility, the gut inflammatory response, the gut's immune system appropriately. So it can really benefit irritable bowel syndrome once we clear up any bacterial overgrowth or fungal overgrowth in the intestine. So we got to start with your gut, even though I mainly work with, hormones, neurology, immunology. If I don't start with the gut, everything you're going to be taking is going to be a waste if we don't start there. Now, the nice thing about Sacred 7, those amino acids work whether you have an overgrowth of candida, you have an overgrowth of bacteria. Those amino acids are actually going to help the hypothalamus. They get absorbed in the small intestine really easily into the bloodstream to the hypothalamus and help the hypothalamus start to operate much more efficiently, very quickly, without feeding the rest of the overgrowth of bacteria. And then once we heal up the SIBO, heal up the other colon imbalances, we heal up the candida, then you can start taking the Genesis Gold. So I have just one question here related to the gut that was sent ahead. And Julie asked what I think about bitters and their relationship to good gut health. So bitters are botanicals that actually cause you to produce more digestive juices and enzymes. There's lots of different forms of bitters. They do them in, you can take bitters in an alcoholic drink and an elixir. You can take bitters as herbs. They can actually improve digestion for people who suffer from indigestion. So that can be very helpful for people with indigestion and people who are just not making enough pancreatic enzymes or not making enough hydrochloric acid in their stomach. Bitters can be very helpful. She asked also, can you take too many probiotics? You can. You can also take the wrong probiotics for your body. So sometimes you're taking probiotics that just isn't the right match for your bacterial microbiome. Usually that's because your microbiome's out of balance and those friendly probiotics are kind of fighting with those pathogens. Once those pathogens are cleared up, they usually sit well. I like to get my probiotics. There's probiotics in Genesis Gold, a little bit in there. I also like to get them through fermented foods on a regular basis. If I feel like my gut's out of balance, diarrhea, abdominal cramping, I think I've eaten something bad, like something that might have had food poisoning. It may be a little bit off. Then I'll take extra probiotics just to kind of shore up my own microbiome. For people who have chronically low probiotics that we see their microbiome's kind of low in colony count, what we see on like GI profiles on stool tests, they may need to take probiotics for anywhere from 90 days to like 6 months to really heal that. If you've taken antibiotics, you may need to take probiotics for a couple weeks after you're finished with antibiotics just to heal up if you've killed off. So those are reasons to take probiotics, but you can take too many. You can't take too many if you're taking them constantly. So give yourself a break, see how your gut feels. Go back to what probiotics you feel like you need. There are probiotics that are, specifically designed for anxiety, depression, to fight off, female vaginal yeast infections. So there's probiotics designed for certain things. They're not meant to be taken all the time. A generalized probiotic, low dose, kind of broad spectrum, can be healthy just to shore up, which is what we've put into Genesis Gold. Very broad spectrum, but very low dose probiotics to really enhance digestion and absorption of nutrients. Another question is GenPro. When are you a good candidate for using it? Now, that's a really good question. GenPro is the transdermal progesterone that I actually developed with my compounding pharmacist. Over about 30 years of us working together, we developed this progesterone formula that worked really well for a lot of different situations. The first situation is in young reproductive women to actually regulate their menstrual cycles, especially if they're under a lot of stress, their body fat's really low, they're not producing enough progesterone because they're not ovulating regularly, they may have polycystic ovary condition, and they're not ovulating. Adding progesterone in what would be their luteal phase, the second half of their menstrual cycle, in the form of GenPro, can really help them regulate those menstrual cycles. I've also used GenPro for women who are prone to early miscarriages in the first trimester because they're not producing enough progesterone. That's called a corpus luteal defect. And so they lose a viable pregnancy easily. And that's because progesterone helps to stabilize the inner lining of the uterus during pregnancy for the first 14 weeks of the pregnancy until the placenta is mature enough to make enough progesterone on its own to take over. So you need your corpus luteum, that little cave that's left over after you've ovulated, to be able to produce enough progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. GenPro has been shown to actually help to maintain a pregnancy in women who have corpus luteal defects. So that's something that can be really useful for women who have miscarriage issues. Regulating your menstrual cycle, a lot of women with infertility issues, that's been helpful as well. Now, once you start having perimenopausal symptoms, the very first thing that happens when you go through perimenopause is you don't ovulate as regularly. Your progesterone levels fall before your estrogen levels fall. And that causes those irregular menstrual cycles, heavy bleeding, skipping periods. So progesterone can help regulate the menstrual cycles, but also help mitigate some of the symptoms of perimenopause, including not sleeping very well, the anxiety, increased PMS, cravings, just basically feeling not yourself. Progesterone can really calm that down. One of the reasons for that is progesterone helps to stimulate GABA production. GABA is a neurotransmitter that has a calming effect in your nervous system and in your brain. And the more GABA that you make, the calmer that you are. And if you don't make enough progesterone, it's hard to stay calm. So progesterone has that calming effect. Once you go through menopause, you need both progesterone and estrogen. So GenPro is appropriate there. You need at least 100 milligrams of transdermal progesterone or progesterone orally, any progesterone, for every 1 milligram of estradiol that you're using. So if you're using hormone replacement therapy, you need to make sure you're getting enough progesterone. In GenPro, it's 25 milligrams per pump. And so you would do 4 pumps a day in order to counterbalance the estrogen you're taking. If you're taking estradiol 1 milligram, if you're taking half that amount, you're going to use half that amount of GenPro. If you're taking double that amount, you're going to use double the amount of GenPro. I have all these instructions written down when you get the GenPro. There's actually instructions on the shopping cart page, which explains how to take it according to where you are in your reproductive cycles. Postmenopausal women, if they're taking hormone replacement therapy, need to continue to take progesterone with their estrogen. GenPro is very appropriate. I've had postmenopausal women who've been off hormones for a while, but still feel like they're having almost like a second menopause where they start getting hot flashes again and they're not sleeping and they're irritable. Add GenPro to actually calm some of those symptoms down. So that's another appropriate time. The other time that I actually recommend using transdermal progesterone in the form of GenPro is for men who are taking testosterone replacement therapy, because progesterone is a natural 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. Basically what that means is it keeps their testosterone from converting into estrogen. We don't want that to happen. Too much estrogen for a man can cause increased body fat, can cause mood disorders, can change their blood glucose, cholesterol. It's not a good thing for men. They need to keep their estrogen levels at a lower level. They need a little estrogen, but not very much. So we don't want them converting. And progesterone can help to block that. Now, men only need a very small dose of progesterone. So they get about 5 milligrams of GenPro for every 40 milligrams of testosterone that they would be using. So if they're taking, let's say 100 milligrams of testosterone per week, they're going to only use like 1 pump of GenPro like every 7 to 10 days or so. So they don't need as much of the GenPro. Okay, next question. Kyla, I hope I'm saying that right. She started taking saw pimento, and she wanted to know how long it'll take to keep her hair from falling out. She's trying to block testosterone from not becoming DHT. So saw pimento is a very good testosterone blocker, blocking it from becoming DHT. DHT, dihydrotestosterone, can actually, if you have too much in your system, can influence hair loss, especially in the male pattern. It takes a while. So saw pimento doesn't work right away. Your hair grows in different cycles. You have a growing phase, you have kind of a dormant phase, and then you have a shedding phase. So you probably won't notice a change in how much hair you're losing for at least 2 months on taking saw pimento. So it's going to take some time. I do recommend anyone with hair loss issues, because it's usually a hormonal issue, to balance out their hypothalamus with Genesis Gold. Most of my patients taking Genesis Gold will notice that their hair becomes thicker, the hair growth, the hair becomes softer, more healthy, like a young person's, like a child's hair, rather than, old and dry. It's just going to be healthier. It's partially because of all the micronutrients in there, but the main thing is because it's balancing out the hypothalamic response to balance out your ovaries, balance out your testosterone conversion, balance out your adrenals, balance out your thyroid, all of which are super important to hair growth. So definitely want to start with the foundation of Genesis Gold, and then you can add things like saw pimento if you have high DHT. So you want to get that checked as well. Barbara asks, she doesn't take a ton of things. She said she had IVIG recommended by her neurologist, and she's taking Levo and Lantus and Humalog for Hashimoto's and type 1 diabetes. So she's having to take some insulin. It's prescribed from Endo. Nothing seems to be working very well at all. She's scared to try anything else. She wonders if Genesis Gold will hurt. She has some antibodies that are indicated with several autoimmune disorders. Okay, so I have had patients that are kind of complicated, like Barbara, where they have multiple autoimmune disorders, do very well on hypothalamic support. I have them go slowly because they're hypersensitive, and they would only take about a third of their body weight to start with for a week, see how they do, and then do 2/3 of their body weight for another week before they're finally on the third week, they're on their full body weight. The reason for that is we're going to go a little bit slower. We don't want them to have a really strong detox with Genesis Gold. Everybody detoxes if they need to. We want it to go a little slower because their body can't handle the detox as well. And we want to go as slowly as possible in introducing it. If they have really high antibodies, I usually add for my patients extra Sacred 7 to bring those antibodies down a little bit faster. But I've had patients with multiple neuroendocrine and neuroimmunological disorders do very well on taking Genesis Gold. And it will not compromise any of the medication she's taking at this point. Julie asked if the ingredients in Genesis Gold is rich in iron because she went to give blood and she's too anemic to donate. Genesis Gold is rich in iron, but not super high dose. The reason for that, it has a lot of sea vegetation, which is naturally rich in minerals, including iron. So if you're anemic, you probably need a little extra iron. Genesis Gold will be very helpful, but you will need a little extra iron in foods. You can get it through foods. You may have to take it as a supplement, but you get iron through red meat, leafy greens, especially if you cook them in olive oil, saute them, and then squeeze a little lemon juice on them. That helps to release the mineral so you can absorb it a little bit better. Leafy greens are a very rich form of iron as well. I have another person here who's anonymous, who's asking about what are the earliest signs of perimenopause and how does she know that she's in it? One of the first signs of perimenopause is a change in your menstrual cycle length. So the cycle length is not how many days you bleed, but how far apart from day 1 to day 1. So if you normally bled every 28 days, you had a period every 28 days, and now it's 30 days, 32 days, or it's 26 days, 24 days. If it's getting shorter or longer, that can be a sign of perimenopause. If you're over the age of 35 and you're having these changes in cycles, that could be a sign of perimenopause. Increase in premenstrual symptoms, increased irritability, increased bloating, increased breast tenderness, increased cravings, increased insomnia, hot flashes can be a sign of perimenopause, even if you're menstruating. Usually women will start to have periods a little bit closer together, and then they get farther apart, and then they start skipping periods. But not all women follow that before they go into full menopause. They're having symptoms in the meantime. Some women don't really notice their symptoms. My patients have been taking Genesis Gold since they've been like young, like in their 20s and 30s, and continue to take it into their 40s when they're starting perimenopause. Their symptoms are fairly mild. But the more you're aware of what's going on and the better you support your hypothalamus, the more likelihood you're going to be able to control the symptoms, as well as if and when you need to get on hormone replacement therapy, you use as little hormone replacement therapy as possible if you're taking Genesis Gold. Now, she also asked, how does menopause affect risk conditions like heart disease and osteoporosis? Going through menopause and not taking estrogen and progesterone can increase your risk for heart disease and osteoporosis, because when you become estrogen and progesterone deficient, you have more likelihood that you're going to lose a lot more bone a lot faster. So that's osteoporosis. You can't build bone density as quickly. So you're going to be diagnosed eventually with osteoporosis. If heart disease runs in the family, especially coronary artery disease, you have a lot more inflammatory markers when you have low estrogen and progesterone levels, which is why we see this kind of spike in heart issues after menopause in women, where we see the spike for men earlier. In their 40s, women, it's more like in their 50s or 60s. It takes a little time to see that spike, but we will see it, especially if you're not supporting your hypothalamus and you're not utilizing hormone replacement therapy. You're going to see a lot more increase in cardiovascular issues. Susan asks, she's 50 years old. She told her OB-GYN that she hadn't had a period in over 3 months. He did an FSH test, follicle stimulating hormone, which is a blood test. Her level was 37. And she said she was in menopause and she needed to stop taking birth control pills. She stopped in the middle of the pack. 2 weeks later, she had her period. What does that mean? Okay, any FSH over the age of 30 usually means you are menopausal. But when you stop taking birth control, which has estrogen and progestin in it, it's building up the lining of the uterus, you're still going to have somewhat of a lining that needs to shed. And so that's a normal withdrawal bleed when you stop everything. It's a little difficult to get FSH levels while people are on birth control pills, but it's possible. I would still use protection, meaning like a barrier method like condoms, for at least a few months up to a year afterwards, just to be sure that you actually are menopausal. No more periods for 13 months, and an FSH that consistently stays over 30 is menopause. One FSH at over 30 is not consistent enough not to potentially have an egg in there that could pop out and you get pregnant. So I would continue to use protection, especially in a barrier method. Heather asks, she sees Genesis Gold has ashwagandha in it, and she's read that it can harm your liver. Is the amount something to be concerned with long term? High levels of any herb, ashwagandha particularly has been observed because it's used quite a bit, can actually cause damage to vital organs that detox you, like your kidneys or your liver. So yes, high levels of ashwagandha can cause some liver issues. There are not high levels of any of the herbs in Genesis Gold. They're all at kind of microdosing. There's less than 120 milligrams per 12 gram scoops of ashwagandha in Genesis Gold, which is a low dose. Can you take it continuously? Yes, at that low dose. I've had patients who've been taking Genesis Gold for upwards of 20 years and have perfectly healthy livers and kidneys. It really is this microdosing and that support that you're getting for your detoxification pathways, for your digestive pathways, for your adrenal glands, your thyroid gland, your reproductive organs, your brain, your heart, your gut, everything that is helping keep you healthy, and your liver can do its job better. So, and I am a believer in lower doses if we can do it, and not high dose. I do use higher doses in certain herbs when I'm treating a specific condition, but it's usually for a very short period of time. Okay, I think I got all the questions, and if I don't have any more questions in the live chat, I will be very happy to see you all in 2 weeks. We will send out an email to those of you in the Genesis Health Club to ask me questions ahead of time, so you can check into the live after it's been posted at your convenience. But I'd love for you to join me during the live so we can really learn more about each other, and I can answer your questions live, and we can have some more intimate conversations about how to keep you healthy. All right, you take care, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.